You're listening to In the Pod, Soybean Updates, a weekly trek into the latest soybean information from NDSU Extension. Planting soybeans into green cover crops is a new practice for many farmers. Chandler Gruener, NDSU Extension Soil Health Specialist, has more details and an update from north central North Dakota. Chandler, how are the soybeans doing in the north central region?
The north central region, like many of the regions here in the north and North Dakota, are kind of a little bit further behind some various issues across the state, especially over here in the western part, in the north central, northwest. We had that heavy week of rains like a lot of other places got, but we went from really dry. So some people got planted, but their soybeans really weren't growing or producing or moving up. And then we got all them rains and it was cool temperatures. So then you're not getting a lot of growth because you're not getting a lot of growing degree units. So growing degree units is them heat units you want to get production of plants. And so that's kind of one way we use to measure it. So we're not getting them growing degree units. Soybeans aren't progressing. Some people actually got delayed. They're in the middle of planting. These big rains came. So they only got to finish the second half of their field after. So some people got a little bit of a mix going on. They've got some soybeans that are a couple weeks ahead and some soybeans that are very, very young yet. But V1, V2 is kind of like roughly where some of them are. But then there's other people that are just in the cotyledon stage, just coming out of the ground. So some of the people that are just coming out of the ground, they got it in right before the rains. They're kind of worried about that crusting. I know that's been talked about a little bit here and there. And so some people are using rollers to kind of push across the ground to kind of push the soybeans, kind of break that soil up to help alleviate that crusting pressure. So it does break down the aggregates. It does crush your aggregates, which kind of goes, a little bit against what you maybe want to do, but you're also going to get your soybeans up because that's the ultimate goal is to get a good profit off your soybeans. Some other strategies to help dry your soil down and actually change some of the aggregates is using cover crops and then planting green into them.
Planting soybeans into green cover crops. How does that even work?
Kind of like what I alluded to when they have that cover crops out there, some producers choose instead of terminating it prior to planting, they'll just go out there and plant it in green. So if you have cereal rye, maybe it's just before anthesis stage, so it's starting to grow, it's starting to mature, but it's not fully there. Maybe it's a little smaller. In North Dakota, we got variable weather in the spring, so sometimes your cover crop gets high biomass, sometimes it's light biomass. This year, some of my fields that I had looked at had, pretty good biomass because of the rains. They thought they were going to have low biomass, but then with the rains, they got delayed planting. So they got a little more biomass out of their cereal rye. And so they were getting some of them great soil health benefits of the roots running down, creating that aggregation in the soil and stuff like you'd like to see. And so we were tying in some of them soil health principles right there, keeping the ground covered, even during them rains, reducing the amount of erosion that could potentially be happening with a lot of them rains, heavy water runoff that could occur. So once they got planted, they just drove straight into it, planted right across the field. Cereal rye cover crop is still growing, soybeans are planted, and then you immediately right after go through with a spray of herbicides is a common method. And so they go through and spray it off with herbicides, and then they'll go and roll it to help kind of knock them down in another week or so after the cover crop is dead. And that will actually kind of push the plants down to kind of open up the canopy a little bit more if they've got a really thick biomass. That's kind of something common because people often have them rollers to help push the rocks in or other purposes on their farm. But some people have bought what we call roller crimpers. So it's that same roller, but it's got like a chevron blade pattern going across it. You can actually use that to roll across the cereal rye or hairy vetch or clover, whatever your cover crop is, and you can roll across it and it'll actually crimp, bend, and kill. So when you're crimp bending and killing off your thing, it'll actually reduce the amount of herbicide need to actually terminate that cover crop. But oftentimes with our herbicide strategy up here, so this practice is common in the south of the U.S., but oftentimes the practices that are used up here, you don't maybe need that as much, and you maybe don't have one of them roller crimpers available to you. You maybe have a roller that you've already bought, and so utilizing the tools you have is always a good way to start when you're breaking into a new practice. And so what it looks like green cover crops kind of looks a little strange. You're planting in something green field. It's not normal, but it actually can work out with that spray right after and rolling to help knock it down if you got high biomass that you're worried about.
Chandler, what's the Soil Health Express that NDSU is offering?
So the Soil Health Express is NDSU Soil Health Demonstration Trail. It'll be traveling throughout the state. It'll be having demonstrations on erosion, compaction. It'll be having them cover crop roots, kind of like what we were talking about too, alluding to earlier. So we oftentimes see the above ground biomass, but we don't always see that below ground biomass. So we'll have demonstrations on roots there. We'll also have other great talking points there at the trailer, and this will be at the NDSU field days throughout the summer. And so you can check out the website and social media for NDSU Agriculture and find all them dates and locations there.
Thanks, Chandler. Our guest has been Chandler Gruener, NDSU Extension Soil Health Specialist. You're listening to In the Pod, Soybean Updates, a weekly trek into the latest soybean information from NDSU Extension, supported by the North Dakota Soybean Council.